brushing your hair.
No.
Welcome to Halitics. What day is it, Beaei? It's Thursday, 11 East Coast. I shouldn't say the time because people can watch the live stream at any point. So we just say, welcome to Halitics. I'm so pleased to have as our guest, Beaei. Beaei is the Illinois outreach organizer. You can see it on your screen there for climatedefiance.org. And we've also got a big slide up as well from that organization. We're going to play a video. We're going to play three videos for you. As you see, Beaei in Illinois. So we'll also get to the Chicago mayoral race. But let's just talk about you for just a sec, Beaei.
Yeah.
It says organizer. I really wanted to start with this. Because I've been an organizer now for a number of years. I think the best part of it is meeting people like you, right? Getting together. We met through a mutual friend, Maury Johnson, the hero from the holler, working on the pipeline, that horrible Manchin pipeline, trying to stop it. And, as it can be a lonely job, but when we work together, it really does feel, I guess it feels good, right? I mean, I don't know what else to say.
I think of like what Francis Fox Piven, the great organizer activist, talks about how it's not always easy work. It's not always fun work, but over time, you have a victory here, you have a victory there, you make a difference in people's lives, you connect with people like we connected. And it's so rewarding and satisfying to say, if I die tomorrow, my life was not in vain.
Well, I hope, that's a really interesting way to put it. And I think given where we are in society, there's so many challenges that we face. And certainly, given what we're trying to do here, Beaei, I think there's a lot of times when we get, at least I shouldn't say I get down. I don't know if you do. So that thought that we're trying to make a difference and hopefully now and again, making a difference can sustain us.
Yeah, a lot of my comrades and friends really get down about these things, and I do too. Like if I looked at myself 2 years ago and where I was really frustrated about things, and I felt I saw potential, but I didn't know if any of it made a difference, and that can be very overwhelming and hard for people when you get into that vortex, because how do you get out of it? And yet we do have ways through, and we do have ways that we can make a difference, that we can change the world. There's leverage. We're not without leverage, and we have a lot of power, but we don't know it. And it's like I remember in the poetry of William Blake, the eternal artist is asleep and is missing out on what they could be part of. And in this visionary way, I feel that we too fall asleep sometimes, or have a hard time, or can't participate, not allowed to participate because of the oppression that we're experiencing. And it's hard, but I think there's also ways through. I believe so.
So let's talk a little bit about your organization. I mean, I know you're a member of a number of organizations, obviously, but the one we're here to focus on, I think, today is Climate Defiance.
Oh, yes.
And I want to actually, we're going to play a video. I don't have the audio, but this is your website. This is the Climate Defiance website, and we mentioned it. You can see it on your screen. Beaei is the Illinois outreach organizer, although we've met a couple of times in DC, of course, Belly of the Beast. And it really is a pretty horrible beast, actually. And you'll see when you were there confronting the White House climate czar. Is that an official title, by the way, before we play?
The White House climate advisor. Yeah, White House climate advisor. But that's his domain, right?
Right. And that's Ari Zaidi, or no,
Ali Zaidi.
Ali, I said Ari, Ali. Okay, here's the video, though. This is your website, climatedefiance.org. You can see Beaei's, or the website is there under the title I have for Beaei on the screen. And I also want to remind folks, click subscribe. You can see it, Halitics, bottom right of your screen. And also, I've been saying to folks, you don't have to click like unless you like it. I'm going to amend that. You do have to click like, because the more likes we get, the more distribution this stream and future streams that I do and future videos will get. And we definitely want to get maximize our visuals. So
it's actually an act of activism to like it, in a sense, because you're helping push this important message to everyone. And so you can help in your own way by liking.
I hope it is an important message. That's the goal. Anyway, it's important today because we have Beaei on. Normally, maybe it's not as important. But
well, you know,
I
tend to differ, but I think you've got a lot to say, Hal, and I appreciate
I sure have a lot to say. No argument there. Let's play. So this is going to be silent. You said there is audio. I couldn't get it when I was playing on my computer, my laptop. But here's your really beautiful website. You go to climatedefiance.org, and here it comes up. So let's go through this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And you can see here, we're talking about the crisis that we're in the midst of right now. And the fact is that although we've done more than we've done before, now we're balancing that out by doing the wrong thing. And President Biden has broken his promise of no new drilling. That was something that allowed him to take the nomination from Bernie Sanders. And so it's very frustrating now. But if you look, the White House Correspondents' Dinner is a DC institution. It's a huge press opportunity for President Biden, but he can't have that press opportunity if he's not going to keep his promise. And this is one of the few pieces of leverage as activists that we have to influence him and pressure him at this moment. So it's a big thing that we can do here. And we have a chance to, again, make history. You know, many of us who are in Climate Defiance were also part of the Action Now or Never, where we blocked the congressional baseball game. And we were so effective at that, they had to actually stop taking tickets and wave people in. And I was on the red team. I saw what we did. And it was something that we helped set the terms of the fight for the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act got passed on the eve of our action. So, or it got, Manchin gave his support for it. So this work works.
So I saw, and I want to just briefly touch on that picture of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I did stop the video there, Beaei, and what I was thinking, and you and I may defer on this, and also you're a lot younger, so you may not be familiar with the song, but to me, it was like the Who song, Bob O'Reilly, meet the old boss, or meet the new boss, same as the old boss. I'm not seeing differences. You know, people talk, we have become so partisan, and you know, at least on the left, people that I come in contact with, Republicans bad, Democrats good. I'm not seeing huge differences. And even with the idea that Trump is some sort of sui generis, unique evil that we haven't seen the like of, and we have to vote Democrat we must vote blue no matter who, because we have to stop Trump. I look at those pictures, I look at the people in their suits and their tuxedos and their Snickers and their, you know, the world is great for us, while right outside the ballroom on the street are people panhandling.
That's right.
Are the seas rising and the Arctic melting? And I'm like, I'm not getting that, you know?
Yeah, that's right. And we have to remember that our real friends are people in the working class and people who are vulnerable in the society, people who are marginalized, the homeless. And we don't want to, as activists, become too cozy with the personalities of politics. I take a lot of influence from Gene Sharp. So I consider our struggle, I try to be very amoral about it. Like I don't try too much to understand President Biden as a human being necessarily. Like I think he has good intentions. I believe that, but also I think that the Democratic Party is very corrupt, and I think that it's corrupt, but it's struggling for itself. And so while the way President Biden is currently going, for instance, I would not support him in the primary. If he becomes the nominee, I will vote for him and protest him. But I feel like that's a practical choice. I don't feel like that's a touchy-feely choice, because I'm on the side of the working class and working people and the homeless and the vulnerable and the marginalized. We can't look at this correspondence dinner as a fun gala that we are a part of. We need to look at it as something. This is our chance right now to put pressure on these people to change history and do the right thing. And I've put pressure on the Biden administration before, and it's worked. And so I plan to keep doing that. But also, if somebody better comes along, I think we ought to support them. Unless President Biden change. If President Biden wants to be the president he promised to be, and follow climate science, follow justice, follow love, I believe he has some love in his heart, and I think he should follow that. I don't think he should follow with the oil industry. I don't think he should worry about his political things so much, and we need to keep that pressure on him, because we don't care if it's President Biden or it's somebody else. They've got to do the right thing, and we're going to pressure them either way.
All right, we've got Beaei with us, Illinois outreach organizer, climatedefiance.org. You're listening to Halitics. Please subscribe. You can subscribe in the bottom right corner. We're going to talk more about the drilling in this administration, but I so appreciate what you said about trying to, well, you said amoral. I think maybe you're saying you want to keep personalities out of this, right? I mean, we're focused on policy. We're focused on action. That, I never fell in love with politicians, but to the closest I came, Beaei, was with Obama. And it disappointed me repeatedly over and over on issue after issue. And I've come to the point where it's like, I liked Bernie Sanders a lot. I wanted Bernie Sanders to win, but he disappoints me too. And I don't view anyone as some kind of knight in shining armor who's going to save us. Only we have some power to save ourselves, and it's incredibly hard. And the last point, and then I want you to wait, and then I want to get to the video. We have plenty of time. Is I find it so frustrating because so many of the folks we work with, Beaei, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear the criticism of Joe Biden. They don't want to hear the criticism of AOC. They don't want to hear the criticism of Bernie Sanders. And I don't know what to do when these public servants, that's what their job is, don't serve us. I don't know what to do, but she's not on our side right now. AOC is not taking on Amazon the way we need her to, the way she said she would. And I don't know what else to do but point that out. And it gets people very angry sometimes, gets our allies very angry.
Right. And this is such a critical moment as we're fighting fascism, right? Like we're seeing all around the country education being dismantled, whether it's Black history and the true history of this nation that we have to still confront, or whether it's trans kids in school being forced to detransition because their government wants to score political points. I think that these are really hard times, and we've got a lot at stake, and so we have to, and we also have our own individual integrity at stake in this time. And I think everybody, like as an activist, a lot of people have said to me, "Why don't you run for office?" and things like that. And I say, actually, I think I'm more useful outside of office. I don't want to have to. I want to be able to speak my truth all the time, and I want to be able to pressure the people in office to make sure they do the right thing, because this is such a critical moment. And like, I don't I want to make sure that we're getting ourselves the best electoral position that we can, whatever that is. I think that if we get the Republicans in office, then we can't do nonviolent direct action on them, or we get beat up more, right? Like it's not good for us as activists. And
I mean,
like
that's an interesting way
I
to
don't
look at
mind
it.
being a
So
martyr, right?
the theory is the Democrats at least let us go out in the streets and don't beat us up. They still ignore us most of the time and don't do what we want.
Well, yeah,
And they still take money from the corporate elites.
right.
But at least they let us protest without violent.
Well, and they'll veto bad bills, and every once in a while they'll do incremental public sector works, right? Which help fix the Overton window for us. Though
I don't see
it's
it
so
moving.
inadequate.
Beaei,
It's so
I don't
inadequate.
think it's moving because for example, I can't criticize the war in Ukraine. I can't criticize the American involvement in that war without getting attacked.
Yeah. And I think it was interesting watching Democracy
a Putin
Now. Pocket,
right? Putin
yeah, the other
pocket.
day they had a debate, I think, between Medea Benjamin and Matt Duss, and what an example of the divide on the left right now. And we have to recognize that we have to support our sisters and brothers in the movement, and we also have to support. We have to look at the human rights complexities of it, right? Because it is a war of aggression, and whether you're Jeremy Scahill, right, or you're anybody else in the political space, we're always going to talk about the fact that it's a war of aggression, which makes it not quite the same in human rights terms as, say, if it had been totally uncomplex, right?
When we invade Iraq,
right,
it's pretty hard to come up with a good justification for that. And in fact, the justifications that were presented were bogus, right? The WMDs, the yellow cake uranium, those were not in the end proven true. But it is true that Putin launched the war. I don't want to get into a big debate over it. We probably have slightly different views. But the point I was making is exactly what you're making, which is it seems as though we can't have a good faith discussion or disagreement on the left about Ukraine. It's like we've locked ourselves into a point where that is a little too far for many on the many Democrats to go.
It's a hard debate to have. And it's but there's like I've actually been on both sides of the debate in different ways, right? Like I've spent a lot of time studying people like Ambassador Chaz Freeman's work, and he was the person who had said, could this be a war down to the last Ukrainian, which Noam Chomsky often quotes as well.
I say that as well on occasion.
Yeah, and so
we're fighting for the last Ukrainian.
And the problem is American diplomacy has been tragic around this, with the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty under Bush, and Putin said this is a mistake when we withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Like we've had so many violations in our sphere.
We're not credible. We're not
right.
credible.
It's that we ourselves have messed up our own diplomatic situation, and the left has been complaining about this for years. And maybe the war was preventable in some way.
Well,
but of course,
Putin
made a war of choice, so it puts us in a more complex position. And I think that's the.
All right. Before we get to I'm cutting you off a little bit.
Yeah. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I do want to get to Climate Defiance, but I also Beaei. And of course, now I spaced out, which is never good, on what I was going to point out. So let's just go right to the Climate Defiance clip.
Yes.
So here's your tweet. This is what Climate Defiance tweeted out, and we're going to show the video. We turned out and forced to White House Climate Advisor Ali Zaidi keynote address. We shut it down. The president committed ecocide. What did you mean by ecocide? Well, I showed that tweet earlier this week, and I wasn't clear. What were you referring to there?
Yeah, well, let's look at Willow, right? And the fact that this is not what is going to push us farther away from our climate targets. And so it's very simple. The president says that science is real, that we should follow the science. He said no more drilling, and he and his team agree with us that there is a climate emergency and there are very specific targets, but they agree with us when it's politically convenient. And then when it's politically convenient to grease the oil industry's treads, we go right ahead and do that. And like, I think we have to demand of the president to be courageous in this moment. It may be scary for him to have all those lobbyists come after him or not be his friends, you know, but there's no excuse. And we're going to demand it of him. We're not, and we're trying to reach the heart of this matter, and we will not rest if we have to divide the coalition, you know, by getting people to say, hey, President, you're wrong. Then we will do that.
Let's show the actual direct action on screen for folks. And Beaei, you're gonna see Beaei in there. And I was super impressed. And then you've already alluded to this. I want you to think about this, though. Explain to us why this makes a difference, maybe more of a difference. This kind of direct action, a direct confrontation, maybe our last best hope for democracy versus, sadly, the ballot box. Not saying we should ignore the ballot box, but that it seems as though without more, we're not going to get to where we need to go. So here's your video. Let's play it. And I'm going to transition over there. So here we go.
I want to jump right in. You did it. Hi, friends. Keep your promise. No new drilling. Keep your promise. No new drilling.
And let me stop it for a sec. Where are you?
I'm on the left right there.
I mean, where are you all? I can see you, but where are you? Like, where physically was this event?
So this was at the CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I think it was on the second floor. There was a staircase, and we went up to the meeting. And as it began, we all just walked up to the stage, took our place, linked arms, and began saying,
you can see
keep
the
your promise.
security guard there is not. What is he doing? Just sort of milling around?
He was. I mean, in this action, at first he was pretty mad at us, obviously. I tried to communicate to him that we were here with love, that this is an act of love that we're doing, and it's because we love our environment, we love our country people, we love our neighbors, and so we're here to. In a sense, you could argue that we're supporting the Biden administration and doing the right thing, right? Like, this is the best thing that could happen to Biden, because if he could be an environmental president, even if we make him against his own will, even potentially, couldn't be anything better. So I wanted to communicate that on some level, that we're here in love, but we're also here in a kind of hard love, a tough love.
All right, I want to play. Yeah, let's get to the rest of this, and I really want to kind of. There's actually a woman, we're going to hear her speak. I thought she was very, very strong, and I was taken by what she had to say. So let's get to this.
Really grateful for you showing up. Really grateful for your voice, for your message, for you being here.
The IPCC doesn't say to drill a little bit. It says extraction has to stop. The IPCC and the science, I'm a physician, the science is very, very clear. Yeah. Drilling has to stop, and all the green lighting of drilling on federal lands is more than Trump.
Yeah. President Biden lied to us. He lied to our faces. He said he would end extraction on federal lands, and he has not done that. He has expanded it.
Exactly. New promise.
We want him to keep his promise. No new drilling.
All right, so that's really strong stuff. And I want to just make this point here. Let's see if we can stop that video here. Give you guys a shout out at Climate Defiance. So the woman who said she's a physician, it's not, it doesn't say a little bit of drilling, right? It says no drilling. And I love that you had a woman who's closer in age to me, because I've been working a lot with Sunrise, and they are all 30, really, they say 35 and under, but I think by the time you hit 30, they're starting to push you out the door a little bit. Is that a reason why you like Climate Defiance as well? Because they don't have that age. And I think it's great. If young folks want to have their own space, I love it. But I think we need to be inclusive in this movement.
Well, I'm not opposed to organizations. Like, for instance, if an organization like Sunrise says we want to limit it to people under a certain age, that might have its own effectiveness in its own way, right? And then, on the other hand, we're inviting a lot of different people into our group from across the movement. And that's all what we're interested in. It's a youth-led movement, yes. And yet we want to have diversity of minds in our group. We don't want to be one voice. And we want to build solidarity, mass solidarity. So I think there's a lot of power in working across age difference, across gender lines, across race lines, across queer lines. There's so many opportunities. Homelessness, there's so many opportunities for people to build power together where we may not normally expect it.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful sentiment. I appreciate that a lot. And I realized what I was going to point out, or earlier that I dropped the ball for a second. Do you see, and let me get to that through this question. Do you see the environmental movement as a unifying issue? I mean, you said we need to have queer people of different colors, different ethnicity, different classes. Is the environmental movement a unifying issue? Because we are seeing divisive issues like gender issues can tragically divide us. Reproductive rights issues can divide us. How can we make the environment, because and the right is good. The right is good at, and the corporatists, not just the right, but the corporate elites are very, very good at putting wedges between us, putting a crowbar between groups that should be in lockstep, and splitting us apart and pitting us against each other.
Yeah, I think that this, I don't know if the environment, if there's one issue. I think this is a difficult thing, right? Like, if we don't do something about the environment, there's no more life, right? Like, and that's unacceptable. So is it an indispensable issue? Absolutely. And could it be the one issue that unites us? Perhaps. I think there's many factors to it too. For instance, I've been studying for the past year with Lone Tron and Dr. Loretta Ross. And there, Lone Tron is the person who came up and coined the term calling in when they were writing for Black Girl Dangerous blog. And that we can't treat each other in a movement as disposable. And that there may be appropriate times for call-outs. It's not to say that call-outs aren't a fitting tool, but we've used them in the movement for years. But that we need to treat each other as comrades, as not disposable, that maybe sometimes somebody doesn't fully agree with us and we take a little bit of extra time with them and love them a little bit more and show them the ropes. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was with, John, everybody remembers when Jon Stewart was living on the Senate steps. I was there with him, and David Hogg was there, and it was a lot of veterans, and we were getting the PACT Act passed. And we did. We went to the White House and got to be part of the signing. It was an amazing experience. But when we did that, I was around a lot of veterans who I might have been their first trans friend. And maybe they'd by accident misgender me sometime. And very often I'd oh, hey, I know you did not mean anything by this. And, like, I'm not trying to put you down or anything. I just want to let you know I identify as a woman. And a lot of times the response I'd get in that case was, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm so sorry. Like, please forgive me. And they'd never make the mistake again. And I'm not saying everybody who's trans has to do that. I do that as a trans woman, and that's something I'm learning to do.
Beaei, I just want to interrupt you there because I honestly did not know your gender until you said what your pronouns were when I asked you them, because I wanted to have it correct on the screen, and I didn't even know. You might have said I don't use pronouns. I mean, I think that's a personal choice.
Right.
But from knowing you, my sense is that if I had referred to you as a he or as, whatever, a man, which I could have done. I mean, I was thinking about this to remind myself, once you told me, my sense is that you wouldn't have shamed me or embarrassed me. I mean, I think you have to, and I think you've made this point, and you use the term love, is assume good faith in people until you're sure they aren't acting in good faith, until you have good reasons to believe that they're deliberately trying to be confrontational, difficult, make life unpleasant for you, or that they're truly a bigot or worse.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be everybody who does this. There's some people who have experienced a lot of trauma in the society. We have a very abusive, brutal society that we live in. So some people are going to say, you know what, I can't call this person and I'm just going to walk away, and there's no shame in that in principle. But we also, for those of us who are able to step up in this moment, and I've had a lot of privilege. So I've had parents who love me. A lot of trans people do not have parents who love them, who care about them. And so I can be really generous with people. And that's one of the things that I'm learning in Dr. Loretta Ross's teachings, are that in the movement, we can give each other grace. And maybe that's actually going to make us happier and more satisfied as human beings if we're able to do it. I don't expect it of everybody, but it's we want to build our beloved community. Like this has been an ambition since the civil rights movement. Let's do it now.
All right, 100% on that, no question. I think that's how we get to the next place, is where we again, until we have good reason to believe the worst of our fellow citizens, let's believe the best of them. So Beaei, this is what I was thinking. In terms of when you're talking about the working class, we've got to focus on the working class also, because history has shown that struggling people, working people, will scapegoat and other unless they feel that their needs, their economic desperation is being addressed, is being heard. And I just heard this story. I couldn't believe this. I can't think of two more like sort of American artists, musical artists, than Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton. And they teamed up for a song. I think it's called Rainbow. I'm not sure, but it's a plea for love to gay people, and acceptance and tolerance. And some communities are saying, I think some schools said the kids can't perform this song. And it's awful. I mean, personally, I probably would never, ever listen to Dolly Parton and Miley Cyrus singing together or apart. But that said, if I did, I would want to hear that song. Well, I remember 9 to 5. Okay, so I got that one. But but I would love to hear that song, and I think it'd be beautiful. And I love that it's intergenerational. That's very cool. But I mean, what's going on with our society, that this is the focus, right? This is how they pry us apart. This is
it all began with Holder v. Shelby County, right? When we dismantled the Voting Rights Act. That's kind of, that was a huge mistake that probably is going to haunt us for a long time. Like, it wasn't like Jim Crow was even dead totally, right? Like, we just made it so that people maybe could get away from it a little bit more, and so that people and we did real change on voting, which was powerful, and now it's like we're falling downward and outward, and so now the states' rights movement has come back, and somebody was saying to me the other day, and I believe this is true without looking up the facts, but that that during the Nazi purges, that it was often trans people and queer people who were dealt with first and earliest, and that people didn't care, and that even after they liberated the prison camps, queer people were often still considered to be inferior
They had they would
and worthy
wear-
of brutalization.
pink stars. And also what's interesting, interesting, is you, even in a regime as evil as, and this is part of that evil, no matter how evil they are, you still had an elite caste where you would have Nazi officers, Nazi elites who would take sexual, pleasure, their own, of course, by if they were trans or gay, because that's part of every society, though people
Anybody can be an oppressor.
Right. And some would in fact take sex slaves, I think is the right term, just as the heterosexual or whatever. I mean, I don't would take sex slaves from and rape Jewish inmates and captives. So too would you have some situations, and that was true in enslavers also would do that. We have to move towards economic justice, towards equality, just period. I mean, that's always been my answer, Beaei, and yet it's very unsatisfying in one regard, because I don't know how we get there. I mean, I just don't. It's too hard. You even yourself said you're privileged, I'm privileged. I have a lot of things in my life that I don't really want to give up. I don't really want to get out in the streets and risk arrest. I just don't want to. I have joy and pleasure in my life, but there are too many of us who, are homeless, who are struggling, who have very, very little. And I don't know how we change that dynamic. I mean, we're struggling to do it, is what we're trying to do.
We are. One of the things that that I work on is as an educator and a teacher, I'm a practitioner of systems thinking. And so one of the things that systems thinkers point out, systems thinking is a lot of things, but in the systems thinking tradition, there's a fight against conventional management. That traditional top-down hierarchical management has destroyed us as a society. They've brutalized us. And that's part of the school system, in the way that, like, a school, when you go to it, very often you punch in at 8 and you punch out at 3, just like in a factory, and you get moved along in a factory kind of setting. And we'll talk about the mayoral race in just a second. But one of the things about the work that systems thinkers have done is they've demonstrated that the public sector can actually operate in a democratic way without having to treat employees as disposable by firing them, but rather by working and supporting the people in organizations and making management's role that, and allowing the people on the front lines to be the major decision makers in the work and make their own measurements for learning. And it turns out when you do that, like in public housing repairs in the UK, they did this. We're talking about 60,000 properties being repaired in public housing. 99.9% of the repairs are being done in the day and time that the person requests it, and to their complete satisfaction, they save £1 million a year. And this is being demonstrated all across the world in different organizations. And the beautiful thing about it is you make more money, you can pay people a living wage, and the people working in the organization, their opinion matters. They can challenge their bosses. It's not a hierarchy. And if we looked when Milton Friedman was thriving, Keynes didn't live long enough to challenge Milton Friedman. I think he would have. But Milton Friedman looked at the fact that we couldn't stimulate the economy in a slow recession and said, oh, Keynesianism doesn't work, so now we can move on to the other thing again. And that wasn't actually true. It was true that if you try to stimulate the economy and it's inefficient, that won't work. That part was true. Milton Friedman was right about that, and that's why he was able to gain so much ground. But as it turns out, if you look at a company like Toyota Motor Company, the Japanese car company, they guarantee lifetime employment. They allowed their workers to challenge any manager. The lowest worker could say to their boss, "I think you're wrong," and they'd make up a test and they'd try it out. And you had a workplace where the workers were allowed to challenge the management, and the management had to treat the workers as a fixed asset and support them. And they became the top car company in the world during the oil crisis of Milton Friedman's time. Toyota was the only car company in the world that turned a profit without laying off a single person, and it was because they had integrity with their workers. And so my hope is to build a workers' movement where, as workers, we are not only in control of what we're doing, we're being allowed to think in the workplace and use our intelligence to save society money, so that we can do things inexpensively and get everything done and support the people in all the ways we need to be.
As Beaei said, and I was really intrigued by what when you mentioned systems thinking to me, I didn't know what you were talking about. I looked it up. I put that definition up earlier, but I'm not going to go back to it now because
no, it's okay. It's a tough. Yeah.
But yeah, we're in Illinois, so I know I looked it up on Wikipedia, which is like my go-to for like the kind of the 101, right? Systems thinking 101. But let's get to last issue. This is a super important election. Okay, the Chicago's the second. Yes. I believe it's probably the second largest city, the third largest metro area in the country. Maybe LA or Houston's bigger, but I think it's number 2 in terms of the size. And in fact, I was interested that Jesus Chuy Garcia, who's a progressive Congress member, he's pretty progressive. He actually ran for mayor because, a lot of people in Congress view being mayor of a big city, you have more power. You're executive, you control at least you have a lot of say over police, over schools, over housing. So for Jesus Chuy Garcia, it would have been a step up, and unfortunately he didn't. I would have voted for him, I think, although I don't live there. But you got these two men, yes, Vallas and Johnson, Brandon Johnson. You're, I assume, supporting Brandon Johnson.
Oh, absolutely. Right? And I've been supporting Brandon Johnson in the primaries. It's true.
You support Brandon him over
Johnson.
Chuy?
Yeah, and we supported Chuy when he was running against Rahm Emanuel. Chuy's a great candidate, and he's a great congressman. And frankly, a lot of people in Chicago say, "You're doing great in Congress. Why would you want to leave?" Yeah. I think like we need Chuy in Congress. Brandon, it's if you look at it, right, like Brandon was, when he was running for during the primary on Democracy Now!, Barbara Ransby was his spokesperson on Democracy Now!, which, if you don't know her, she teaches at the University of Illinois, and she has her own organization there that does social justice work. She wrote the definitive biography, I think, maybe I shouldn't say this, but she wrote an extraordinary biography of Ella Baker that every organizer needs to read, because it's so modern, and it puts a perspective on the civil rights movement that is of our time, that we're talking about, and she doesn't often get credit for her work. But Barbara Ransby was the person who was supporting Brandon Johnson on Democracy Now! So he's got the support of the local community in a way that Chuy didn't, I should say. But it's different, right? And Brandon comes from the community of Austin in Chicago, which is where my grandparents, my dad grew up there. My grandparents lived there all the way till the 2000s. And I grew up playing there and had friends in that community. In fact, our nonprofit plans to do work there. But he's from Austin, so he knows what it is to have bullets in his children's window at night. he is not somebody who is living in, in Palos, in the suburbs in luxury. He's a person who's living
Lake Forest or something, right?
Right.
Let me play the video here. Sorry to cut you off. We don't have
Yeah.
that much time. This is about 2 minutes from NBC News. Kind of gives you a sense of this race. And I will also weigh in why I'm honestly not very enthusiastic about either candidate. But
Okay.
I would vote for Brandon Johnson, but I'm not so thrilled about him either. Here's the video from NBC News. Oh, we're not getting
I think you need to, there.
Yeah, there we go.
From tomorrow, and the candidates will be out in force this week to shore up some last-minute support from voters. NBC5's Kate Chappell in our studio this morning with a look ahead. Kate.
And Michelle, the runoff coming up April 4th. Endorsements continue to roll in for both Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson. Yesterday, ahead of the Greek Independence Day parade in Greektown, Senator Dick Durbin, alongside longtime former Secretary of State Jesse White, endorsed Paul Vallis. Durbin said there was too much at stake to stand on the sidelines of this mayoral election.
We need a mayor who has a record of experience tackling the challenge of building the Chicago economy and creating a positive environment for business growth and good jobs. Now, I have known and worked with Paul Vallis for over 40 years.
As one of the top Democratic leaders in our nation, Senator Durbin's endorsement today is particularly personally special because of our long relationship.
Meantime, Brandon Johnson picked up more national support. Legendary civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton is backing Johnson. He spoke before the congregation at New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church with another civil rights icon, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Both also hope to see a higher voter turnout than the February election, when just 32% of registered voters showed up to the polls.
Brandon talked about that on my show, and they try to put that on. We are not the defund the police. We are the define the police. We get to tell the truth. And so now the very people who caused the mess, they want to be back in charge of the mess that they created.
Johnson also has the backing of newly minted Congressman Jonathan Jackson, who spoke at a campaign event on his behalf in South Shore. Today, both candidates are scheduled to attend a People's Dialogue on the Environment at 5 p.m. at Lincoln United Methodist Church. Ahead of that, Johnson has a... All
right, I'll stop it there. Jonathan Jackson, I believe, is Jesse Jackson's son as well. So he's got this. Is that right, Beaei? I think so, right?
I believe. I don't know 100%.
So he's got the support of the Jackson family, and Vallis tries to make the point that it's he has biracial support, with Bobby Rush also supporting Vallis. But you are seeing it break down mostly along racial lines, which I think is very unfortunate. Johnson getting a very large majority of African-American support, over 2/3. And Chicago kind of, I guess it's sort of, what, I don't know, 40% white, 35% black, and then minority, other groups, Latino and Asian. But mostly the blacks are supporting the black candidate. Mostly the whites are supporting the white candidate. I think that's unfortunate, Beaei. I know Johnson's trying to reach out, but crime is holding him back, is it not? That issue seems to be what's defining this race for white Chicagoans.
I believe, I grew up in a neighborhood that became gentrified, Bucktown, and I've been canvassing in Bucktown, and what I've noticed is that a lot of white people, if they've just listened to the news, if they've just if they don't know what's going on, very often they might consider Vallis. But when all the facts are laid out for them, for instance, Vallis says he wants to hire, I think, 2,000 police officers, but it'll take him 2 years to roll out these police officers. It's not actually a very fleshed out plan. And then we're talking about also all the police, we're talking about Brandon Johnson just very simply saying, okay, 30% of the calls that go into 911 are calls that would really be better helped by having mental health professionals, and we need to build a community of support. When Paul Vallis is a kind of special darling of Chicago, He was my CEO of the CPS when I was a student. And I actually there was a time where he ran to the left of Blagojevich as a progressive in the state. It's hard to believe now, with all his police support with the Fraternal Order of Police. It's hard to imagine that now, but he ran for governor. I campaigned for him at that time because he was the most progressive Democratic governor. Things have gone gone in a different way now, and so Vallis sees that he can win only if he says, I'm a friend of police and I'm going to hire as many cops as I can, and I've got your back, right? But what he's not actually serious about anything. His plans are just lures to manipulate white voters. When I go out and I knock on doors and I talk to white voters about the real issues, even old neighborhood people, like old neighborhood Democrats, when they hear what's going on, they don't like Vallis. They're more interested in Brandon. And I know Brandon is going to have stuff to learn. It's not going to be easy, but that doesn't, he's our big hope right now in Chicago to make a change, even if he's not as good as we want him to be, which I don't believe that. I believe that he could do very well. Even if he's not as good as we want him to be, at least we can protest him. I think it would be a lot harder to protest Vallis, frankly.
I think my concern, and again, from what I've read and I don't live in Chicago and it doesn't really matter. And so I haven't really acquainted myself as much as perhaps I should with the race. Clearly Johnson's the more progressive. Clearly he's more for working Chicagoans, except maybe the police. My concern is, again, that this is breaking down along racial lines to a point where we're not seeing the candidates focusing on, or at least to my satisfaction, on making life better for the average Chicagoan. And what I think kind of supports that theory, Beaei, is we are seeing establishment Democrats falling on both sides. And when I see Jim Clyburn supports any candidate, then I get very, very nervous about that candidate. So Jim Clyburn, who was very famously he won Joe Biden the White House, in my opinion. Jim Clyburn was a very powerful force against Nina Turner in Cleveland when she ran for Congress back in 2020, and then again last year when she lost the second time. I don't think she was going to win. Clyburn went to Cleveland to campaign against Nina Turner, Senator Nina Turner, at that time former Ohio State senator. And now he's on the side of Brandon Johnson. And what that tells me is that he has been vetted, Johnson, and that he is acceptable. He is not going to push that Overton window to the left. He is going to fall in line with other progressive Democrats.
I hear what you're saying on that, and I hear that that's not an unreasonable expectation. And I didn't like what I was campaigning for Bernie against Biden, so that was a very sad moment for me too. And I liked Nina Turner a lot, and I wanted her to win. So that was also very frustrating. What I will say about Jim Clyburn, just on one level, his daughter, Minion Clyburn, was one of the, on the FCC, she was one of the staunchest advocates of net neutrality. And I think it's just complex, right? Like in our political scene, we're going to work with different people. And what's most important is that we don't let Paul Vallis win, right? That he's not prepared to seriously challenge the police in Chicago. And a lot of us are going to end up getting beaten up probably if he wins.
Right. And it's also not a case where you're saying anyone but Paul Vallis will do, although you're making that point. You also believe, Beaei, and I take you, and I accept this because I know you. I know your sincerity. I know your commitment. I know your knowledge that Brandon Johnson indeed will be a progressive a mayor who will fight for the people of Chicago.
I mean, I've been contradicted. You know, I campaigned for Obama. I campaigned for him when he was a senator, and I've been wrong about things in the past. I'm not saying that I know Brandon Johnson will be good. What I do know though is that he has a good platform, and that's something we can always hold him to. But he comes from Austin, which is a big deal in Chicago. Like Austin is, when my grandparents stayed there, they had bricks thrown in their windows because they were trying to integrate the neighborhood. And it's like the fact that Brandon Johnson came from Austin, that's a big deal. He has to be responsive to that community in some way, or else he'll have to sever ties with them. And then two, Brandon Johnson also, he's an elected official. He got reelected. He ran against a corrupt incumbent. And I think that he has more experience than people are giving him credit for, and so I think there's aspects of his candidacy that are just very strong. And yes, we're asking people to take a risk, right? But you know, like Paul Vallis will probably be having a good time on weekends and things because he'll be running such a tight machine, as it were, that he won't have to think about much. You know, I'm sure he's a great administrator in whatever he decides to pursue, but obviously it's the wrong kind of administration. I don't think it's the kind of administration that Chicago needs.
All right, I want to thank you so much, Beaei, with us from Chicago, and great talking to her. Really, really appreciate the time. That was a great hour, Beaei. Thank you so much. And I'll be back tomorrow, Friday, and no show Monday. I'll be back tomorrow. Hope you join me. And don't forget, click like, click subscribe.